We talk about the different stages of grief and we talk about the different stages of learning. Well, in my experience, there are different stages of behavioural economics too. Hi, I'm Bri Williams, the Behaviour Changer. And by the end of this video, you're going to know the one thing businesses who successfully use behavioural science do differently. Because when it comes to behavioural economics, there are 3 stages people seem to go through. And there's one critical juncture which determines whether they will succeed or fail. The first stage is being oblivious. This is when people haven't heard about behavioural science, they haven't heard about nudge theory, they haven't heard about behavioural economics. Through no fault of their own, they're ignorant as to how decisions are actually made. When it comes to getting people to take action, whether that's their colleagues or their customers, for example, they're relying on outdated and flawed assumptions. Assumptions like money's all it takes to motivate people, or customers always want more choice. And then, once people don't actually do what they want them to, well, if they like them, they'll excuse it, and if they don't like them, they'll write them off as being stupid. All to dampen down that frustration about not being able to achieve what you want to achieve. That was me 14 years ago, by the way, doing the best I could with what I knew at the time and thinking it was true. But then something wonderful happened. And this is the pattern other people follow too. They come across the field of behavioural economics. That might mean they read a book, or they find a YouTube channel like mine, or perhaps they are in the audience of a seminar. Well, they're not in stage 1 anymore. Welcome to stage 2. Obvious. A funny thing happens when people are exposed to behavioural economics. It all seems so obvious. That's what so many of my clients tell me after watching a keynote, or perhaps after reading one of my books. It is all so obvious. Well, yes, it is, once it's pointed out. Like a fish who realises that it's been in water all this time. Yesterday we were oblivious, today everything is obvious. Now, for anyone who's helping people embrace the field of behavioural economics, which is something I do, we have a couple of key tasks to get done. To move them through stage 1, we have to wean them off those flawed assumptions. Flawed assumptions like, being better is enough to get people to change to you, or that you can rely on what customers tell you, or if we just tell them what to do, they'll do it. Now, to move people beyond stage 2, beyond everything is obvious, and away from, gee, people are wacky, our task is to shift them from interest to action. Because if they stay in stage 2, all they'll get out of behavioural economics are some funny dinner party anecdotes. We need to move them beyond that to application of behavioural science. Because while things are very obvious once they're pointed out, or when you have an expert helping you see them, they're not so obvious when it comes to sitting down and trying to write an email when you're under pressure, or developing a new campaign, or redesigning your website, for example. Let alone picking up the phone and having a conversation with a customer. Which brings us to the critical juncture I was talking about. Stage 3. Interest to action. People's embrace of behavioural economics can go one of 2 ways. Path 1 is the easier path to take, and the lazier path to take. It's the path where nothing actually happens. The sugar hit wears off and normal programming resumes. And by normal programming, I'm talking about your habits and patterns of behaviour. You don't change the way you write an email. You don't change the way you conceptualise and design a campaign or a product. You don't rethink how you're going to engage important stakeholders or customers, for example. Because, you see, the more difficult, the more courageous, and yes, the more rewarding path to take is not the one where nothing changes. It's the path where everything changes. Everything changes because you change. you change what you do. You don't just read a book or watch a clip. You take the science and you use it. I mentioned there was one thing that businesses who successfully use behavioural science do differently. Well, it's this. They use it. This is the critical juncture. The third stage, where you can either take the well-trodden, habitual, comfortable path, but that path is mediocre, it is frustrating, and it is wasteful, or you can take the second path, the path that requires a little bit of courage, a little bit of curiosity, but ultimately it requires you to change the way you do things so your business can do things for the better. If you'd like some help with this, please get in touch. Don't let the opportunity of behavioural economics pass you by, because when you change behaviour, you can change your world.